Hey guys, Captain Rick Murphy here. Thank you for hooking us up here on the Captain Rick Murphy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the subscribe button, tell all your buddies. But you know what? Today I want to talk about fishing mullet. Now, whether we have the spring mullet migration, the fall mullet migration, guys, we have mullet in the ecosystem here in Florida 365 days a year, 24/7. So I think it'd be really cool to go over a couple key things. The reason why I got this big snook here is the biggest snook that I ever caught. This is a replica of it. We're talking about a fish that was almost 48.5 inches long. I believe this fish probably weighed 34 or 35 pounds, and I caught it in the spillway in Boynton back in 2012. But the reason I thought it would be neat to talk about mullets is part of the story is we went to the spillway and we had mullet this size. And after catching 20 snooks or so, but nothing nearly this big, we took a break because it was in July, it was hot as heck. And so we went and got some iced tea, got a burger, let the sun come down a little bit. And while we were sitting at this marina, or this actual restaurant on the water, I looked across and I saw a marina and I saw some big giant mullets. I mean mullets like this, guys. And I said to the captain, hey Danny, do you have a cast net in the boat? He said, yeah, I do. So we went over there through the cast net one time and we had 5 mullets that were this big. Well, what this does, guys, is when you throw this into a place where you're catching 20-pounders, you just change the game, because a 20-pound mullet can't eat, a 20-pound snook can't eat a mullet that's this big. But look at the size of this fish's mouth. It's no problem whatsoever to swallow a big mullet. You know, this is a 10-inch mullet that Savage makes, or an 8-inch mullet that Savage makes. It matches the hatch perfectly, but you can tell there's going to be a difference in the size of the fish. If you're trying to catch a big fish, change and go to a mullet like this. So let's talk a little bit how we're gonna rig this. Now, I created for Eagle Claw a hook using the 9/0s and 7/0s. This is the TK 5 PT. And what I did is, this hook I really liked. It had a great hookup ratio, but when we're using live bait, so many times the bait will hook back into itself because the bait can slide up. Let me show you an example. We'll just use this circle hook that doesn't have a bait keeper. And what ends up happening is the bait will go and slide up the hook. If we've got it hooked like this in the mouth, slides up like so, and then it will foul and the hook point can come back into the gill of the fish. And meanwhile, you're 100 feet away and you don't know that you're fouled. And what this does is, one, it kills the bait, but then number 2, you're never going to hook the fish. If your hook's buried back in, how can you get a bite? So it's really important that I think you got to make sure you have a situation like this bait gripper, or the bait saver hook by Eagle Claw. It has this little point and mono that's tied with this bead that keeps the bait from sliding up to the shank of the hook. And what that does is it doesn't allow it to actually slide back into itself. Like so. If that was our mullet, you see how it can't slide, and look, as it turns, it's not going to go back into the fish. This is a 9/0. We make this in an 8, a 7, and a 6. I like, certainly for a bait this size, I would want like a 6/0. If we're going to a big bait like this mullet, we're gonna try a 9/0. Now remember this, when you're fishing this, you're gonna want to fish a big bait's gonna draw a big fish bite, whether it's a tarpon, whether it's a snook, whether it's a trout. So you gotta make sure that you have a big hook. So I use a 9/0 on a bait that's probably 8 inches or bigger. I go through the mouth and I pop it out of his head. At that point right there, it's going to work really well. Now remember, this is a big bait. We got to allow that snook to get that bait down into his throat. And then when we decide to hook him, we're just going to simply, with a circle hook, we're just going to point the rod down the line and we're going to reel as slow as we possibly can so that the hook will slide out of the bait, out of his mouth and hook him in the corner. And most of the time when you catch a fish on a circle hook, it's gonna be either here or it's gonna be right here in the button of the nose. So keep that in mind, guys. Now, leader size just depends on the size of the fish you're fishing. If you're bait fishing, I'm gonna say nothing smaller than 50 pound. But you might have to go up to 60 or even 80 pound. If the water's dirty, you can get away with that. You're fishing in an inlet like Government Cut, where there's a monster snooks, or you're fishing Port Everglades, any place that has a canal. You're fishing down at Flamingo, East Cape Canal. There's a variety of different places. All your inlets, if the water's dirty, you go up in size so that you don't break a fish off or he wears through. Remember this, if there's no structure around, there's no sense in ripping his face off, guys, because what you're going to do is you're going to actually help saw the leader off by pulling harder and harder. If he's not trying to get into a dock pylon, he's not trying to get into mangroves, you don't have to pull. If he's offshore of anything that may saw you off, back off on your drag a little. Let's talk a second about the rods. If I was throwing lures for snook, this would be the rod and reel combo. It's 7.5 feet long. It's a medium action rod. But guess what? This rod is not going to have enough backbone. Even though I've got it loaded with 20-pound braid, the Berkley 9X braid, guess what? It's not going to have enough backbone to stop this fish. When I filmed this show recently over in Boca Grande with my friend Billy Ahlstrom, we were using 400-pound hollow core. Look at the difference in the size of the rod and reels, guys. This is an 8-foot extra heavy. Now, because we were fishing around docks for fish of 40 inches or more, we knew we had to horse them out. We're fishing 150 to 200-pound leader, but the water was dirty. We're also fishing big, giant baits. If you don't want to go to that extreme, then here would be something in the mid-range, which this is loaded up with 80-pound braid. It's the same rod, you know, extra heavy. We're going to use the same thing. We can use some 80-pound leader, but this is, at this point, is still very, very castable. So those are some of my suggestions. You're using a pin 6,500 to an 8,000 size reel, because they're going to crank in a lot of line per reel handle turn. So keep those things in mind. Again, we're going to go in the mouth of the mullet. We're going to pop it out. This can be fished anytime there's mullet around. You might have to net some of those big black mullet that you see around. In the fall and the spring, you can cheat a little. You can fish with the silver mullets, or even you can get the little finger mullets that would be about this size. Downsize your hook as the bait sizes downsize as well. Guys, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you tuning into the Captain Rick Murphy YouTube channel. Don't forget to tell your friends, and make sure you subscribe by clicking on the button below.